I spent 100 days in Stardew Valley. If you're wondering about my 200-day video, my PC crashed and I lost the save file, so I'm just doing 100 days again. Please do subscribe and enjoy the video. In the morning of day 1, I grabbed my parsnip seeds and headed outside to clear an area. After making a large empty space for my parsnips to grow, I planted them and headed into town. The first thing I did was buy some bean seeds, then returned home to plant them, before heading back into town and spending the rest of the day talking with the villagers and clearing my farm before heading off to bed. I woke up on day 2 to some mail from Willie which said that he had come back from a fishing trip and that I should go meet him. So after watering my crops I headed straight into town and down to the beach. When I got there I collected my rod and fished until my small inventory was filled. I then sold my fish and spent the rest of the day chatting with the villagers, then heading off to bed. When I woke up on day 3 I headed outside to be greeted by a crow munching on one of my precious beans. Rip bean. So I decided to go into town and buy a new bean, but of course Pierre's was closed, so instead I just went back to my farm to properly explore the place as I had never played on a wilderness farm before. I then headed off to bed. On day 4 I was watching the television when it told me that there were lots of spring onions growing down in Cindersap Forest, but before I went down I had something else to do. Something very important. I bought more beans. Down in Cindersap Forest, I collected my spring onions and some other forageables before returning to my farm and spending the rest of the day chopping some trees before going to bed. Day 5 was my very first harvest of 15 parsnips, so after harvesting them all I ran down to Pierre's to sell them. With all of my new cash I bought a bunch more parsnip seeds and beans, which I planted. I then ran up to the mines where I gathered some loot before running out of energy and forgetting that I didn't have the minecart anymore. I then went home and because I was on a wilderness farm I decided to stay outside and wait for monsters to come, but after hours of standing outside and no monsters I just went to bed. In the morning of day 6 I watered my crops and headed straight into the mines. After filling my inventory I went back to my farm and emptied everything into a chest before wandering back down to do some foraging. After picking up some new spring onions and other various forageables I went back to my farm, emptied my inventory and went to bed. On day 7 I decided to donate some things to the community centre, so after watering my crops I grabbed some forageables and headed into town. When I got to the community centre I realised that I couldn't donate anything because I can't read. So instead I spent the day fishing in both the river down south and the lake on my farm. I then went to bed. In the morning of day 8 I walked outside to be greeted by some mail from the wizard asking if I could come over to his tower, so I headed out. When I arrived I knocked on his door and he gave me some drugs, and now apparently I can read alien writing. I did this joke already. I then spent the rest of the day fishing to save up for a new fishing rod, but once I did I spent all of my money on it and I realised that it was the same one I already had. I went to bed feeling very large brain. On day 9, my parsnips were once again ready for harvest, so I grabbed them all and headed out to Pierre's. After selling them all, I came away with nearly 1,000 gold, which I instantly spent on a heap more parsnip seeds. I then went home to plant them all and then spent the rest of the day foraging before heading to bed. Day 10 was a very special day. It was a special day because it was the day I could finally adopt my new cat, Nob. Because it's gotta be Nob. I then did a lot of different things. First I watered all of my parsnips, I headed up to the mines. When I ran out of energy I headed back down to the town and gave Vincent a present for his birthday. I then went down to the beach to fish for a while and then finally I wandered home and went to bed. On day 11 I spent almost 2 hours in the morning watering my crops. I then wandered into town and bought 4 bean seeds from Pierre, which I immediately went home and planted. I then walked up to Robin's to check the price for a coop before giving some forageables to the community centre, then going to bed. On day 12 I woke up and it was raining, so I didn't have to water my crops. The first thing I did was grab some of my items and go donate them to the community centre. I would never forget the community centre. I then spent the rest of the day splitting my one chest into a bunch, then sorting them all out and colour coding them. I then went to bed. When I woke up and exited my home on day 13, I was greeted by a whole lot of beautiful parsnips, so I excitedly harvested them all and ran off to Pierre's, until I realised that the egg festival was going on. So instead I went back to my home and put all my produce away, then waited for the festival to begin. When it did, I brought some strawberry seeds and managed to get 10 eggs, winning a straw hat. Very, very useful. I was then teleported back to my home where I planted the strawberries and went to bed. On day 14 I woke up excitedly to sell my crops, so after watering my other plants I hurried off to Pierre's to make some money. After selling them all I came away with more than 2,000 gold. I was going to buy the bigger backpack, but instead I spent all of my money on potatoes. I then planted them and spent the rest of the day talking with the villagers, then going to bed. When I checked the television in the morning of day 15, Living Off the Land guy told me that it was salmonberry time, so I quickly watered all of my crops and ran off to find some berries. I searched for the entire day, and by the time night fell I had more than 20 berries and a bunch of horseradish and spring onions. I sold some stuff then went to bed. In the morning of day 16, I watered all of my crops, then headed straight down into Cindersap Forest to gather forageables. My goal by the end of the day was to get my money total to $1,000 just off selling flowers and stuff, which I managed to accomplish. I then threw some remaining things in the shipping bin, then went to bed. On day 17, my beans were ready for harvest, and I realised if I sold them I could finally buy the fiberglass rod, so I grabbed them and excitedly ran to Pierre's. It was closed, so I went down to the beach for the rest of the day catching fish. By the end of the day I had bought the fiberglass rod off of fish money, so I went home victorious. Day 18 was the day that my forageables that I had been growing were ready, so I harvested them. I then noticed that I had 10 geodes in my chest, so I grabbed them and headed straight to Clint's to get them opened up. I ended up getting a couple of donatable things, so I gave them to Gunter. I then spent the rest of the day clearing my farm before going to bed. In the morning of day 19, I woke up and was watering my plants when I accidentally chopped one of my beans. It will be missed. Even through all of my sorrow, I went down to Pierre's and spent all of my life savings on cauliflower. I then went home and planted them before spending the rest of the day fishing before going to bed. Day 20 was a very exciting day. It was exciting because when I walked out of my home, an entire crop of potatoes was waiting for me. After picking them all, I headed straight to Pierre's to sell them. I came away with a solid $4 grand, which I instantly spent on a bigger backpack and 40 kale seeds. After planting them all, I spent the rest of the day clearing my farm before going to bed. When I woke up on day 21, I harvested my strawberries, and after watering my other plants, I went and sold them. After making a little money off that, I decided to make the most of my new backpack and spend the rest of the day in the mines. I made it to level 8 in the end, but the real problem was tiredness. I then put away all of my loot and went to bed. On day 22, I wanted to make some money, but none of my plants were fully grown, so instead I wandered up to the mountain lake to fish. I fished all day until I finally ran out of energy. I ended up getting a bunch of fish, and after selling them I made a solid 700 gold after going to bed. In the morning of day 23, I decided to go for a fish in the river flowing through the town. So after watering my crops, I headed straight to the river. After fishing there for the entire day, I went up to the community center to donate some fish, then went to bed. Day 24 was the official Stardew Valley flower dance, so after watering my plants I headed down to the forest. When I got there I asked around, but no one wanted to dance with me, so I just stood on the side. Weird. When the dance finished I got teleported home, and with nothing else to do I just went to bed. On day 25 I decided to have some fun and play some Journey of the Prairie King, so after watering my crops and doing some fishing I got playing. But after dying on level 3 I realised how much I disliked the game, gave up and went to bed. In the morning of day 26 I walked outside and saw that all of my kale was fully grown, so after watering my other plants I got harvesting. I then wandered down to Pierre's to sell them, but also gave him a flower for his birthday. I then went up to the mines and spent the rest of the night there until I got exhausted. I then went home, put away my stuff and went to bed. With my newfound riches on day 27, I decided to buy a coop from Robin, so after I watered my plants, I realized that I was huge brain and planted my cauliflowers too late so they wouldn't grow. Then got chopping trees. After chopping for a while, I grabbed all of my resources and wandered down to Robin's. I ordered it, placed it, then spent the rest of the day foraging before heading off to bed. Since day 28 was the last day of spring, I decided to fish for the entire day just in case I didn't catch a fish that I needed for the community centre. But after fishing for the whole day and not getting any new fish, I went to bed confident that I had them all and anticipating the coming summer. Day 29 was the official first day of summer, and this time I took a different approach to my crops. I still spent all of my money, but this time I spent the majority of it on hops, since they would be a continuous food source and they produced every day. And later I could make lots of alcohol. I then went back to my farm and spent the rest of the day planting my new crops before going to bed. When I headed outside on day 30, my coop was completed, but I didn't have enough money for either a silo or chickens, so I just ignored it. After wasting all of my energy on watering 50 hops, I ate some beans and wandered to the mines. After nearly dying there, I headed to the wizards to complete a delivery before spending the rest of the day collecting forageables, then going to bed. I forgot to record on day 31, but all I did was go to the mines and grind to level 20. In the morning of day 32, I wanted some cash, so after watering all of my crops, I headed straight down to the beach. After clearing it of forageables, I went to the pier and started fishing. I ended up getting quite a lot of fish, and when I went to bed that night, I got nearly 1,500 gold off of profit. On day 33, I wanted to finally get a silo to go with my coop, so after grabbing my resources, I headed up to Robin's. I decided where it would go, then fished for the rest of the day before heading to bed. In the morning of day 34, my first summer harvest was ready, so I excitedly picked the peppers. After watering my crops, I then headed into town and into Pierre's where I sold them, then bought some sunflower seeds. I then returned home to pick up every item that I could donate to the community centre, then wandered back into town to donate them. I spent the rest of the day fishing before heading to bed. On day 35, my silo was finished its construction, so after watering my crops I got to work making hay. After filling my entire silo, I then decided to donate everything I could to Gunter, so I picked everything up and headed into town. In return, he gave me a bunch of seeds, so I spent the rest of the day cultivating them, then going to bed. Day 36 was very useless. I started out the day wanting to get some chickens for my coop, so after watering my crops I headed down to Marnie's. She wasn't there, so instead I spent the day giving gifts to the townfolk before heading to bed. On day 37, after watering my crops, Marnie wasn't at her house again. Since I was already down there, I decided to spend some time fishing. After doing that for a while, I wandered back down to my farm to do some clearing before slowly inching home and going to bed. Day 38 was the day that I would get my 2 chickens, and I was sure of it. So after watering my crops, I headed straight down to Marnie's, and she was there, at her shop. And I was just about to buy my 2 chickens when I realized that I didn't have enough money. So I sprinted back to my house and picked up some extra crops, then ran over to Pierre's to grab some quick money. But it was Wednesday, but I had one more plan up my sleeve. I ran down to the beach, picked some forageables and sold them to Willie, and I finally had enough money for my chickens. So I excitedly ran back to Marnie's and finally got my chickens, which I named Duck, Crumbs and Egg, with 3 G's. I then spent the rest of the day clearing my farm before going to bed. Day 39 was the beach soup thing, so after watering my crops I headed down to the beach. When I arrived I added my strawberry to the potluck and the governor seemed to like it, so that was a waste. I then teleported back home and went to bed. In the morning of day 40, I decided to go to the mines, so after patting my chickens, I headed out to the mines. I ended up making it pretty far and even ended up getting a mushroom, which would be very useful for the community center. After a successful day in the mines, I checked my cave and then went to bed. Day 41 was officially the day my hops were fully grown, so I harvested them all and went down to Pierre's. After selling them, I realized that hops would make a great food source, so I went down to the mines and spent the rest of the day there. After making it to level 40, I went home and went to bed. On day 42, after harvesting my crops, I headed straight up to Clint's to upgrade my pickaxe. After paying him, I then headed down to the beach where I bought some bait and got fishing. I fished for most of the day before heading back home, throwing them all in the shipping bin, then heading off to bed. In the morning of day 43, I harvested my hops, then headed into town to donate some things to the community centre. I then decided I wanted to go into the secret woods, so I went up to Robin's, bought a chair, and did a funny thing. Unfortunately, there were no fiddlehead ferns, so I just fished there for a while before going to bed. On day 44, my pickaxe was ready to be picked up, so after watering my crops and patting my chickens, I headed into town to grab it. After picking up my copper pickaxe, I decided to spend the rest of the day in the mines testing out my new pick. After reaching level 45, I decided to call it a day and go to bed. Day 45 was a special day. It was special because it was the day I began the legendary mine grind. Never done before. So I watered my crops and got grinding. On day 50 I reached level 70 and got the Master Slingshot. On day 51 I reached level 80 and got the Firewalker Boots. On day 55 I reached level 90 and got the Obsidian Edge. On day 56 it was the Dance of the Moonlight Jellies. On day 58 I reached level 100 and got my very first star drop. It reminded me of money. On day 62 I reached level 110, and finally on day 66 I reached the bottom of the mines and got the skull key. I had finally done it. Day 67 was a busy day. I started out by harvesting my yams and eggplants that I had planted over the mine grind, then headed to Pierre's to sell them. I then bought some sunflower seeds which I planted when I got home. I then went to say hello to Robin, who was working on my new barn, and spent the rest of the day collecting blackberries, then going to bed. In the morning of day 68, I decided to donate some things to the community centre. So after grabbing some things, I went over. I donated them all and ended up finishing the boiler room, unlocking the minecart. I then spent the rest of the day fishing in the sea before heading off to bed. On day 69, I started out the day by harvesting some cranberries and patting my chickens. I then spent most of the day chopping grass on my farm for hay. After collecting a bunch, I went up to the community centre and donated a yam before heading off to bed. In the morning of day 70, my pumpkins were ready, so I harvested them and headed into town. After selling most of them, I bought some wheat seeds, then donated some pumpkins to the community centre. I then went down to Marnie's and bought 4 cows. Holy cow, scowl, cowboy, and coward. I then headed home, said hello to my new cows, and went to bed. On day 71, a new duck was hatched, which I named Bulboo. I then went up to Clint's to pick up my new copper pickaxe, which I immediately upgraded again to iron. I then went home and picked up everything that I could donate to Gunter and donated them. I then got some paintings in return. Returning home, I realized how many geodes I had, so I picked them all up and went down to get them opened. But apparently Clint can't open them when he's literally doing nothing. I then went home and went to bed. Day 72 was the Stardew Valley Fair, so after patting my chickens and grabbing my items, I headed into town. I was trying the strength meter game when I got the lowest possible, and the guy gave me a star point. Who even knew that happened? After setting up my display, Mayor Lewis judged and I came first, winning 1,000 star points. I then bet them until I had 5,000, then sold out the store. I then went home and went to bed. In the morning of day 73, my iron axe was ready, so I went up and collected it. I then spent the rest of the day opening geodes at Clint's before donating everything and spending the rest of the day unlocking and clearing out the secret woods. On day 74, I decided that now I had an iron axe, I wanted a horse. So after doing some grinding, I got chopping hardwood. I started on my own farm, then went down and cleared out the secret woods. I did the same thing over day 75, and finally on day 76, I went up to Robin's and bought my stable. All I needed to do now was wait, and finally on day 78, my stable was complete, and I could finally use my horse. In the morning of day 79, I milked my cows, then headed up to the town and into Clint's to upgrade my pickaxe. I then went to the secret woods where I cleared it of hardwood before spending the rest of the day fishing, then going to bed. On day 80, after doing my chores at the farm, I headed straight down to the secret woods to clear it out. After getting some hardwood, I then picked up some fish to donate to the community centre, donated them, then fished for the rest of the day. I ended up getting a lot of trash for some reason, but I did go to bed after catching a good amount of fish. On day 81, my steel pickaxe was ready, so I did some chores on the farm and headed into town. After selling some produce at Pierre's, I went up to Clint's to collect my new pickaxe. I was so excited about it that I proceeded to spend the rest of the day in the mines collecting iron for future tool upgrades before heading home and going to bed. In the morning of day 82, I wanted to do some fishing, so after tending to my animals, I hopped on my horse and rode to the beach. I fished for the entire day, then went into the community centre to donate some things, then went to bed. Day 83 was Spirit's Eve, so after fishing at the mountain lake for a while, I rode back down to my farm and went to bed, completely forgetting about it. Big brain. Day 84 was the very last day of fall, so I spent the day fishing for all the fall fish that I hadn't yet fished. After fishing at the bridge in town for the entire day, I donated some of my catch to the community centre, then headed home to bed in anticipation of the incoming winter. I didn't record again on day 85, all I did was go and upgrade my hoe and grind in the mines. It was the morning of day 87 when I checked my friendships with everyone. I literally had no friends, just like in real life. So I had to fix that. I spent the entire day collecting gifts and giving them away, and I wouldn't stop until I was friends with everyone. And on day 96, I decided to stop giving all of my hard-earned items to the townsfolk. But I did manage to become friends with a bunch of people. In the morning of day 97, I patted my chickens, then went straight to the community centre to donate some things before going down to Clint's to pick up my new gold axe. I wanted to test it out, so after buying a pickaxe upgrade, I headed down to my farm to chop wood. I chopped for a while, then went to Robin's and bought a house upgrade. I then spent the rest of the day in the secret woods before going to bed. On day 98, I tended to my animals before heading to the minecart to travel to the quarry. After clearing it of trees, I remembered that my pickaxe was being upgraded, so instead I went into the cave next to the quarry to get the golden scythe, but then I remembered that my pickaxe was being upgraded. I then went down to the beach to see the night market when I realized that it was tomorrow, not today. This was not a good day for Dave. On day 99, when I was wandering around my farm in the morning, I found an owl statue randomly outside my barn, so I grabbed it and put it near my home. After tending to my animals, I once again went up to the quarry to get my golden scythe. I entered the mine, and after nearly dying to some skulls, I got my prize. It was beautiful. I then went to the night market, which was actually there. So I got my pearl, looked around some stock, then went home to bed. And it was finally day 100, my 100th day in Stardew Valley, and also the day my house was upgraded. Because it was my last day for now, I decided to spend some money. So after patting my chickens, I went to Robin's where I bought a plasma TV, a calendar and a telephone. With all of my new gear, I went home and placed it all down. After watching some HD TV, I cleared out the secret forest, then went to bed. Thank you all so much for watching.